Welcome back to hour number 3 here on a Buffalo Football Monday. Chris Brown, Matty Glad with you, and joined now by my broadcast partner on the Bills Radio Network, Bills Radio color analyst, former center Eric Wood, joining us. And Eric's appearance is presented by Campbell's Chunky Soup. Big, craveable favorites collide in Chunky Soup's new Mac line, featuring flavors like Buffalo-style Chicken Mac, Chili Dog Mac, and Beefy Mac. Stock up for game day now at your local Wegmans. Chunky soup that eats like a meal. All right, Eric, let's recap Bills-Dolphins before we jump into maybe a look at the Saints here a little bit. And I got to say, pass rush really did not get home on Thursday night against Tua, and I think it was instrumental in Tua extending drives for the Dolphins with completions. What do you think changed up front the most in your mind from maybe week 2 when they were getting home to week 3?
Yeah, we talked before the game, Chris, that we thought that was going to be a mismatch. The right side of the Dolphins offensive line, both right guard, right tackle, both on IR. We thought this was going to be a major mismatch in the Bills' favor. Sean McDermott mentioned after the game that the absence of Ed Oliver played a factor, but he also wasn't available against the Jets. So, when you're comparing week 2 to week 3, I think it was a combination of at times Tua getting the ball out of his hands quickly and, hitting some guys that maybe had off coverage or crossing routes where he had wide open guys on pick plays. But he also had his highest time to throw in a long time. I believe it was like 2.9 seconds time to throw in the game, which is really high for Tua, who is one of those quarterbacks that hits his first read a lot. He's generally closer to 2 seconds. And so I think, give Tua credit, he did one of the better jobs I've ever seen him of manipulating the pocket and creating some extra time himself. And then just guys not necessarily winning quick enough. I felt like the way the game script was unfolding and the Bills playing with a 2-score lead at the end, that it was time that Bosa or Rousseau or somebody was going to get home. And yes, the pass rush was good at times. And when you look at the Terrell Bernard interception, Deion Walker creates a very quick pressure, which distorts Tua's vision. He throws the ball. Bernard gets a pick. So give the pass rush credit there. But it wasn't quite the factor that it was in week 2 and what it needs to be moving forward.
The Dolphins go 10 of 15 on third down. They convert a bunch of third and longs. We heard from defensive coordinator Bobby Babich last week, and Babich said, it's good that we got them into third downs. We just have to get off the field. Then Sean McDermott says the third and longs are very frustrating. Both coaches saying the rush and coverage has got to do a better job of working together. How do the Bills fix it going forward?
Yeah, they came into week 3 with the number 1 third defense in the league. That's majorly there because of the 0-for-11 performance by the Jets in week 2. Coming into this season, when you look at concerns from last year, 29th in the NFL in third down defense, so you said, okay, we have to get better. Well, we bring in Ryan Nielsen. We're playing a little bit more man coverage. We have more 5-man pressures, some different looks up front. But when you look at this last game, the Dolphins were able to hang around and really keep the Bills off the field in the first half because of their third down offense. That drive before the half where they convert 3 third and longs, we're talking about how this could be a 2-for-1 situation for the Bills, and they drain the entire clock in the first half. And the Bills really only have 3 possessions in the first half, and they have 2 touchdowns and a missed field goal, and then you're sitting there with a tie ball game. And so it's got to improve. Yes, it is about marrying the rush and the coverage, but how does that change moving forward? Is it tighter coverage to maybe not allow some quicker throws to the outside? Is it disguising the coverage now that these safeties get more time on task, more comfortability, rocking in and out of single high and 2 high looks? Is it some different looks that you give them up front? We saw some 5-man looks at the line of scrimmage last week, 6-man looks at the line of scrimmage where, maybe only 5 guys are coming, but you don't know who it is. And so I think we see some more creativity. I also think as you get an Ed Oliver back into the mix, as you get a Michael Hoyt back after the suspension, those guys can definitely play a factor in that pass rush increasing on third downs. But, those obvious pass rush situations, I don't think the pass rush was good enough a lot of the time last week. And then there were some times where the throws just seemed a little too easy for Tua in those third and long situations. Now, you also have guys like Waddle and Hill where you have to respect their speed, and you're thinking if they can't make those big-time explosive plays down the field, they're probably not going to be able to score enough points to beat you, considering this offense is likely going to throw up 30 points a game, as we've seen them do through the first 3 weeks of the season. And 12 of the last 13 regular season games, as my broadcast partner Chris Brown likes to say, as long as Josh Allen has played at least one snap or, played more than one snap in a game, so we're excluding that final game against the Patriots. But all that being said, it sounds simple to say it's marrying the rush and the coverage, but then moving forward, it's making tweaks to either allow the pass rush to get home, where maybe you have to take some risk at giving up a big play because you're not going to give up the underneath stuff, or just some different looks and some different pressure packages to get home quicker.
Flipping it around, Miami put a lot of resources into stopping Buffalo's run game. They ran a healthy number of run blitzes. They even had a couple of 4-4 looks that they ran at Buffalo's offensive front with 4 defensive tackles on the field. They got some good penetration into the backfield. I mean, they had 2 tackles for loss, 3 for no gain, 2 for 1 yard against the Bills' run game. Bills still had a good yards per carry average at the end of the night, and Cook got his numbers. But do you think Miami had enough effectiveness where Buffalo should expect more of that from future opponents?
Yeah, the MO playing the Bills forever has been, can we keep up with the passing game? You got the league MVP, and it's nickel defense, and how do we defend these guys? And the Bills offense is just so tough to prepare for right now because they can get in 13 personnel like we've seen them do the last 2 weeks, and those guys can all block. They block well on the perimeter. Kincaid is such a weapon in the pass game, and Knox and Halls have also had their bright moments in the pass game as well, but Kincaid's a matchup nightmare out there. And I expect teams to have to put more linebackers or D tackles or whatever it may be, run those run blitzes to then try and get the Bills out of their run game, because Joe Brady has shown in his time as offensive coordinator that if you're going to play with a light box or we feel like the run game's working, we are going to try and pound you into submission. This isn't Joe Brady necessarily, trying to pad his stats and set himself up for a potential head coaching gig, or, we got Josh Allen, we need to give him the stats because we want him to be the MVP again at the end of the season. If they need to throw the ball and they need to do what they did in the first game against the Ravens, they will. I think this team is content giving the ball off to James Cook, at the rate they are right now, and just pounding you out throughout the game and really taking a lot of pressure off of Josh and the pass protection and everything else. So, yes, I definitely think that you're going to see teams have to go to heavier looks, whether it's base defense, whether it's firing the edges with corners to try to be able to stop this Bills run game. Now, when you do that, if the Bills can catch them, if they can identify those looks and get to the right checks, you're going to be susceptible to big plays when those do happen. So, yes, Miami had a good plan, especially I felt like there was 2 drives. The opening possession of the second half, the Bills drive down the field and score. And I believe at that point, Anthony Weaver said, okay, we're doing something different. And then they were able to force a 3-and-out after that. And then the Bills got 1 first down and then punted after that first down on their 3rd possession of the second half. So I think you're going to see teams have to try to take some chances to be able to create those negative plays, because this offense is so efficient, staying balanced. You just have to try to create those negative plays.
Tight end Dalton Kincaid has been a solid target for Josh Allen so far to start the season. Against the Dolphins, he goes 5 catches, 66 yards, and a touchdown. How does Kincaid's rise complicate things for opposing defenses?
Yeah, I assumed, and we talked to pregame about when you're playing with a rookie 5th-round nickel, 2 linebackers that aren't great in coverage, it's likely a Kincaid or a Shakir game. Shakir gets 45 yards in the game. Kincaid gets 60, and both those guys were going to be effective attacking the middle of the field. Now, they also did it on the perimeter as well, but Josh was going to attack those linebackers, and I don't know. Josh is just petty enough. Like, I think back to when Dotson and Josh got into it leaving practice a couple years ago. He had that, uncalled late hit on Josh after the slide. I assumed Josh was going to try and pick on him a little bit, and, Kincaid's a matchup nightmare out there, and I think obviously he's been a receiving threat since he's been with the Bills. Last year he was dinged up throughout the season. He looks healthy. He looks explosive. but also the way he blocks on the perimeter right now, just tone-setting blocks, taking defensive backs and driving them into opposing team sidelines or out the back of the end zone. His blocking has been exceptional so far through 3 weeks. And no, Kincaid's not your inline blocking, match him up against a 280-pound defensive end. But, man, on the perimeter, he engulfs safeties. He engulfs these corners out there on the screens or the pitches or the end arounds to Elijah Moore. He's such a factor in the blocking game as well. I've been extremely impressed with Kincaid through 3 weeks.
Flipping it back to the defensive front quickly, what did you make of the latest change up front defensively with Daquan Jones playing the 3 technique instead of the nose and Deion Walker, manning that nose tackle spot? And do you believe it was effective enough where that combination could continue if Ed Oliver still isn't ready to return?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially on rundowns, that's a duo that can really man the inside, especially this year where they're not just straight ahead penetration on every play. Those are 2 stout defensive tackles in there with a ton of size. Now, Walker can get washed out a little bit, and I think that will come with experience where he recognizes when the double teams are coming, how he has to leverage himself. A lot of times those guys will drop to a knee, to try and get lower in those situations to simply just tie up the 2 blockers. I think that comes with experience for Walker, but I do feel like, especially in the Jets game, that was a stout duo inside with Daquan at the 3 technique. And, that's something they got to lean into as you kind of patchwork this defensive line with Ed Oliver out, Ogunjobi suspended. You got to get to some of those things. And I think it has been effective. And both those guys have some wiggle to rush the passer as well. So when you put both of them in, it's not, okay, we have 2 just run stuffers inside. Both those guys can rush the passer as well if they can recognize on rundowns that it is going to be a pass play. So I think that's a duo that you can ride with, especially until Ed Oliver comes back.
The Bills welcome the Saints in Week 4. The Saints are 0-3 to start the season. The Bills 3-0. 2 very different teams. You've got Spencer Rattler starting at quarterback for the Saints. So far, he's thrown 4 passing touchdowns, 1 interception to start the season. But it seems like their offense really hasn't come together in a lot of ways. Alvin Kamara looks like the only guy who's grabbing yards for that offense. What do you kind of make of the Saints team through 3 weeks?
Yeah, and the spread opens at 16.5. They travel out to Seattle this week, then fly back across the country, then got to come all the way up to Buffalo. This is a Saints team that's reeling right now, and they go into the season with a quarterback competition between the rookie second rounder Tyler Shuck from Louisville, and you got Spencer Rattler. They decide to go with Rattler. At some point, I think you got to see what you got in Shuck as the backup to see, is this a situation where we need to go try and, I'm not going to say tank, but go give him some reps, and if it doesn't work out, it might work out fine to where you can position yourself for a high draft pick in this next year's draft to then potentially go get yourself a quarterback. But to me, they're a team that's reeling right now. And in the preseason, we heard from Demario Davis talk about how great their culture is now, how they enjoy going to work and all of that. But to me, this is a team that's going to come in, and Chris, you mentioned the run blitzes. I think defensively they got to take some chances and try and create negative plays. And then offensively, are there plays down the field that they try and make? Is there some gadget type stuff? Because when you look at these 2 teams, as you said, Maddie, they're in 2 totally different spots right now. You got a perennial powerhouse in Buffalo and a team trying to find themselves in the Saints. It's a situation now where you're kind of coming in with nothing to lose. Let's take some chances, see if we can create some negative plays. Maybe there's some big plays down the field off some gadget stuff, but they're going to have to really take some chances to try even to stay in this one, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, they're the 4th lowest scoring team in the league. I mean, they're not even scoring 16 points a game. They got steamrolled in Seattle, gave up a long special teams touchdown on a punt return for 95 yards. So when you have a team like this that has literally nothing to lose and can pull out anything from the hat, that's a difficult thing to prepare for. But again, I kind of hear the coaches on this staff in my ears going, we just got to take care of our own stuff and we'll be fine. But you still have to be mindful of that at the same time, don't you?
For sure. Yeah, you got to train yourself throughout the week to just stay disciplined, because you might get something that you haven't seen on film before, because they might be throwing stuff at the wall Sunday saying we're overmatched. Now, they're not saying that in their meetings this week, but that coaching staff knows they're overmatched. So what kind of different things can we do to maybe catch the Bills off guard? And the Bills' next 4 opponents are combined 3-9. Atlanta gets blown out. The Patriots turned the ball over like crazy yesterday against the Steelers. Panthers blew out the Falcons, but they didn't look good through the first 2 weeks. And so these next 4 games, I'm not saying there's trap games, but watching football yesterday, you see the Browns pull off that win yesterday. You got to show up each and every week in this league, because the Packers were talking about potentially going undefeated a week ago. Guys in their locker room and press conferences talking about potentially going undefeated, and then you drop one at Cleveland after a blocked field goal at the end of the game. And so I would assume Sean's going to be in those guys' ear. He'll make sure the guys saw some of the things that we saw yesterday watching games, and that anything can happen in this league. But over these next 4 weeks, it's, hopefully you continue to get healthier. You continue to kind of build on what you're doing now, continue to get that daily improvement that Sean McDermott talks about. And he'll be hard on those guys. I have no doubt about it. Just understanding that, this game may not bring the same emotion as a division game, a Ravens game, a Chiefs game. He'll have these guys ready to roll, I'd assume.
3 weeks in, what's something you're waiting to see that you haven't seen from Buffalo yet? Maybe we could see it against the Saints in week 4.
Yeah, I think one of the popular things is the downfield passing game. And Miami was, daring the Bills to stay conservative the last game. And yes, the downfield shots didn't come, but I believe it was right around 60% of the game. And that includes when they were running run blitzes and when the Bills were trying to run out the clock. 60% of the time they played with 2 deep safeties. And they just simply were not going to try to not let the Bills take the top off the defense and make those big-time explosive plays. So as the Bills continue to stay disciplined, lean into the run game, throw the bubble screens, and all the things they're doing right now, I'd love to see that downfield passing game come to fruition. And then defensively for the Bills, it's how can we continue to tweak our third down defense to set ourselves up for success, to get off the field, to get more 3-and-outs, and not let teams extend drives, which then limit the possessions. I feel like if you play a game right now against the Buffalo Bills and it's an 11 or 12 possession game, they're going to score more than you can. But if you can do what the Dolphins did in the first half last week and only give the Bills 3 possessions, you make the one mistake with the missed field goal, and now you go into the half tied and you think anything can happen now. So getting off the field defensively on third down, and what more would you want to see? Just maybe some different looks. Maybe it's not just, your traditional 4-down look, some different types of schemes to try and free some guys up.
Eric, thanks as always. Safe travels up here this weekend. We'll see you on the weekend, man.
I appreciate it. Looking forward to it, guys.